The account of Jesus' youth concludes in Luke 2:41-52, where, at just 12 years old, he is found in the Temple of Jerusalem, astonishing the teachers with his profound wisdom. After this moment, the biblical narrative falls silent. From age 12 until around 30, the scriptures offer no direct insight into Jesus' life. The story resumes with the beginning of his public ministry, marked by his baptism by John the Baptist, an event recorded across the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This unrecorded span of time is often referred to as the silent years, or hidden years, leaving many questions unanswered. However, in our time, the silence surrounding these years may finally be breaking. Why? Because the Ethiopian Bible, recognized as the oldest Bible in existence, presents a powerful challenge to the traditional narrative of Jesus' hidden life. The Ethiopian Bible is not a newly unearthed document. It has been carefully preserved for centuries. Ethiopia, notably, was never colonized, which means its ancient traditions, artifacts, and religious texts have remained remarkably untouched by outside influences. Some even believe that Ethiopia houses the Ark of the Covenant itself, but that mystery is a story for another time. Returning to the mystery of Jesus' lost years, the Ethiopian Bible offers a remarkable bridge between Jesus' early life and his ascension. It narrates his journey from birth all the way to his return to heaven, filling in the gaps with vivid and detailed illustrations. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how the Ethiopian Bible reveals the hidden years of Jesus, from age 12 to 30, details that the traditional Bible never recorded. I invite you to share your thoughts down in the comments and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, which are packed with powerful and eye-opening information. Now, let's dive deeper into this fascinating discovery. Have you ever encountered anything like this before? Probably not. It feels almost like stepping into a treasure hunt movie, except this is no fiction. The Ethiopian Bible stands as one of the most mysterious and debated ancient texts ever known. Even Ethiopia itself remains a land cloaked in enigmas that defy simple explanations. Ethiopia stands as the cradle of one of the world's oldest civilizations and holds the rare distinction of being the only African nation that was never colonized. Because of this, Ethiopians can trace their heritage all the way back to Ham, one of Noah's sons, a connection that has even been acknowledged by Jewish traditions. However, today's focus isn't on the rich history of the nation itself, but rather on the priceless treasures it safeguards. Within Ethiopia are preserved some of the oldest biblical scrolls known to humanity, texts that predate even the renowned King James Version. Unlike the 66 books we find in the KJV Bible, the Ethiopian Bible contains a staggering 88 books, featuring sacred writings that most of the world's churches have never embraced. These include scrolls from both the Old and New Testaments, as well as unique scriptures that had remained hidden from the rest of the world. What's truly astonishing is that these scrolls existed long before Christianity officially arrived in Ethiopia during the 4th century. This means Christianity wasn't something imported or imposed upon the Ethiopian people. It was already deeply rooted in their culture and history. Since the 4th century, Ethiopia has firmly stood as a Christian nation. The Egyptian traveler, monk, and historian Cosmas Indicopleustes documented during his visit in the mid-6th century that Ethiopia was already a thriving Christian country. He witnessed firsthand how the rulers welcomed countless Christian refugees, offering them sanctuary as they fled persecution from hostile kingdoms and empires that opposed the faith. Some Ethiopian tribes have been worshiping the Christian God for more than 3,500 years, making their connection to Christianity ancient and profound. Contrary to popular belief, the oldest organized Christian body in the world isn't the Catholic Church. It's the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, known locally as Tewahedo. This church has preserved its traditions and teachings without the external influence that altered many other Christian movements. Adding to Ethiopia's remarkable legacy, the country also holds one of the oldest illustrated Christian manuscripts ever discovered. Written in the ancient Ge'ez language, parts of the Gospels were found in 2010, hidden away in a remote monastery perched atop a mountain in Ethiopia. According to the Kebra Nagast, one of Ethiopia's most sacred texts, around the 10th century BC, the Ethiopian ruler known as the Queen of Sheba traveled to Jerusalem to seek wisdom from the legendary King Solomon. This encounter is even briefly mentioned in the traditional Bible canon. However, what the Standard Bible leaves out is that the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon had a son together, named Menelik. Queen Sheba returned to Ethiopia with Menelik, where he later became the first emperor of Ethiopia. Fast forward to the 2010s, and scientific studies analyzing the DNA of many Ethiopians found traces supporting this ancient story, revealing a mix of Egyptian, Israeli, and Syrian ancestry among Ethiopians, dating back roughly 3,000 years to the era when Queen Sheba is believed to have ruled. These findings further solidify the credibility of the ancient accounts. Yet, despite its historical depth and authenticity, the Ethiopian Bible continues to be overlooked and excluded from the recognized canon of Holy Scriptures. In fact, most Christians around the world have never even heard of the Ethiopian Bible. This reveals just how far efforts have gone to marginalize and suppress this ancient sacred text, which naturally leads us to ask, why was this hidden? To answer that, we need to take a quick journey through some important pieces of history. The Bible we have today is very different from how it originally existed. In ancient times, there were multiple versions, interpretations, and collections of biblical writings, each offering its own perspective on what the Bible was trying to communicate. Originally, the biblical texts were written in Hebrew, and it wasn't until later that translations into other languages began. The first major translation was done by a man named Saint Jerome, who translated the scriptures from Hebrew into Latin. His work became known as the Vulgate, completed around April of that year. The Vulgate has remained the primary Latin version of the Bible, consisting of 27 books called the New Testament and 39 books forming what was then called the Hebrew Bible, now known as the Old Testament. During the first century, countless writings about Jesus' life and teachings began to circulate. However, many of these texts were fictionalized accounts, essentially early forms of fan fiction. The real issue was that these fictional stories often blurred the lines for early believers, making it hard for people to distinguish between authentic teachings and made-up tales. Back then, there was no internet, no fact-checking tools, and no easy way to verify what was real and what wasn't. As we know, fake news spreads fast, and in those days, false scriptures spread even faster. It's not hard to imagine the confusion and chaos caused by so many unofficial and misleading books circulating among early Christians. This became a serious concern for the early church leaders. To bring order, they convened at the Council of Nicaea, and later at the First Council of Constantinople, to decide which texts would officially be included in the New Testament. Their criteria were strict. A book had to be written by one of Jesus' direct followers or by someone who personally witnessed his teachings. Additionally, the text had to be written during the first century and had to align with the core message and theology of the rest of the scriptures. Over time, the Holy Bible went through many changes, but one of the most significant transformations came during the reign of King James. Although the Vulgate had been the standard Bible for nearly 500 years, there were still countless variations and translations in circulation. This flood of conflicting versions deeply concerned King James, especially during the 1600s when differing interpretations of the Bible were dividing churches and people alike. King James wanted a version of the Bible that would not only unify the religious factions of his kingdom, but also solidify his own authority. Many priests at the time urged the king to take action, arguing that some of the Bible translations circulating among the people were inaccurate and even misleading. To address the problem, the king assembled a team of 47 scholars, each highly skilled in languages and theology. These experts were divided into 6 groups, each assigned different sections of the Bible, and they worked independently for 7 long years to complete the task. Strict guidelines were put in place to ensure the scholars remained unbiased. They utilized a wide range of ancient manuscripts and linguistic tools, striving to create a translation that was as faithful as possible to the original Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek texts. When the scholars presented their completed work, the priests and King James were amazed. Even though the teams had worked separately, the similarities in their translations were striking. They took it as a sign of divine intervention, believing God had guided them to a unified truth. Finally, in 1611, the King James Version of the Bible was officially published. Thanks to the advancements in printing technology, it quickly became one of the most widely distributed and influential versions of the Bible in history. The edits made during the creation of the King James Bible, and even earlier during St. Jerome's Vulgate translation, led to the exclusion of several books that are absent from the Bibles most Christians use today. Meanwhile, the Ethiopian Bible has continued to preserve all of its ancient scriptures, offering a fuller picture of the faith's early history. Remarkably, Ethiopian tradition also kept alive the stories about Jesus' hidden years, providing fascinating accounts of miracles performed by him during his youth. These tales are drawn from ancient apocryphal writings, texts held in high regard culturally and spiritually, even though they are not officially considered part of the canonical Ethiopian Bible. One particularly striking story tells of young Jesus crafting birds out of clay while playing with his friends. In a breathtaking moment, he breathed life into the clay creations, and the birds immediately sprang up and flew away. Those who witnessed the scene stood in awe, realizing even then that Jesus held the divine ability to create life itself. Another powerful account describes a moment when Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, badly injured his hand while working as a carpenter. Without hesitation, Jesus approached, gently touched Joseph's injured hand, and healed it instantly. This miraculous act not only restored Joseph, but also revealed Jesus' profound compassion and incredible healing power, even as a young boy. According to the Ethiopian Bible, especially within texts like the infancy gospel preserved in Ethiopian tradition, there are far more detailed accounts of Jesus Christ's early life than what we see in the standard Bible. The Ethiopian tradition brings to light a series of miraculous and profound events that surrounded Jesus from a very young age. Some of the miracles described in these texts are even more dramatic than what many are familiar with. The Ethiopian Bible portrays Jesus performing acts of divine power that were both awe-inspiring and extreme, underlining his supernatural nature and sacred mission. 1. Remarkable narrative recounts the Holy Family's flight into Egypt. During this journey, the Ethiopian texts describe how wild animals approached them, but, instead of attacking, became completely tame and submissive in Jesus' presence, signs of divine protection and authority over all creation. Another striking story tells of young Jesus healing sick children and even raising the dead. These early miracles weren't just displays of power. They revealed his deep compassion and hinted at the extraordinary destiny that awaited him from the very beginning of his life. In addition to his miraculous acts, the Ethiopian Bible also highlights Jesus' extraordinary wisdom and deep understanding of Scripture, even as a child. This wisdom left learned elders and teachers in various communities astonished, as they witnessed his ability to grasp and discuss profound spiritual matters far beyond his years. The Ethiopian tradition doesn't just focus on his miraculous powers, it also emphasizes his early role as a teacher and spiritual guide. These stories hint at the future ministry that would profoundly shape the religious world, showing that even in his youth, Jesus was destined to lead and inspire. However, some of the more extreme actions attributed to Jesus in these texts describe him responding with anger. In certain accounts, young Jesus is said to have caused harm or even death to children who mistreated or angered him. Yet, in a display of divine mercy, he would later restore them to life, reversing the consequences of his initial wrath. There are also stories where Jesus, in moments of conflict, used his powers to punish those who opposed or wronged him. Some individuals who challenged him or his family were struck blind or paralyzed by his divine anger. But true to his compassionate nature, Jesus would heal these individuals, restoring them once they recognized and acknowledged his divine power. These dramatic and controversial stories are one of the key reasons why mainstream Christian traditions largely rejected these narratives from the canonical Bible. They were seen as conflicting with the image of Jesus as a figure of compassion, humility, and self-control that was widely accepted by the early church. The Ethiopian canon offers a fascinating glimpse into how the Bible has evolved over time. Contrary to the common belief that the Bible is a single, unified book, it is actually a collection of texts and writings compiled over centuries, each shaped by different experiences, cultures, and theological perspectives. This brings us to the root of the issue. Various religious groups, including those that have come to be recognized as mainstream or orthodox, have a long history of including or excluding texts based on differing theological views or personal preferences. For instance, the Bible as we know it today was largely compiled during the 4th and 5th centuries AD, By that time, Christianity in Ethiopia had already developed unique traditions and interpretations that set it apart from the Christianity practiced in Europe and across the Mediterranean, making its canon distinctly different.